All right, so Andrew, you wrote up. Well, actually, no. You had a video. I was actually trying to figure out exactly who did all the reviews at Android Central, because you did the video. Daniel Bader did some stuff. Alex Doby did the written review. Did you all get Pixel phones?
Yeah, we actually had an embarrassment of riches where we had 2 Pixel XLs and a regular Pixel, and so Alex Doby wrote our like full-on reviews, like 6,000 words or something when he was done with it, all the pretty pictures, all that good stuff. He actually wrote it mostly on a couple of planes. He was flying to Asia and the whole crazy thing.
No distractions.
So, right, no distractions at all, no problem. So he was working on that, and Daniel, who got the smaller Pixel, added in all of his thoughts on the smaller one, where we could say, here's the difference between the big and the small one, because they're 95%, the same experience, or 95% the same. So Daniel pitched in with all kinds of stuff like, about the smaller one in terms of battery life and the screen and how it is to use the smaller one. And then I wrote a more US-centric version of a review of just the XL, which is the one that I have, talking about how it lands in the carriers and compares in terms of pricing, because Alex can talk about the international version, more generally, but what it costs in the various different countries, it's a different discussion depending on where you are and how it compares. I know it's really expensive in terms of Canadian dollars, and that's a different discussion from how it is in the US or the UK, Europe, or wherever. So I took the US-centric approach and talked about that kind of stuff too.
All right, so you spent a bunch of time, or at least the past, I think everybody's had these kind of a week to start with for the, more or less, give or take. What have your thoughts been in a week of living with this phone? Do you feel like it's living up to Google's self-professed hype on its own device?
Yeah, in most ways. I mean, I'll talk about some of the ways that it doesn't quite get there in a second, but I think overall, yeah, it absolutely lives up to it. And the very interesting part is that, I mean, we overhyped Nexuses every single year, of course, but Google did a pretty good amount of hyping of Nexus releases, especially this last generation. They talked a lot about the design and the quality and all this different kind of stuff with the 6P and 5X. They did the same thing with the Pixels, but now they're absolutely back it up in terms of, really, for me, it's just how everything comes together. The hardware is a little on the bland side, you could say, but it's really, really well made. I mean, it's made like a high-end HTC phone, of course. That checks out. But it has all the internals and things sorted out to where the software can really take advantage of them. And that's what you really notice is it's like on another level in terms of performance, touch response, snappiness. There's none of that weird cruftiness where it slows down or randomly gets jittery when you open apps. Everything is instant. Everything works. The way I described it is, if you used a late model Samsung phone, you know how quick they are because they kind of have some extra little optimizations thrown in. This is like that, but all the time. There's never a slowdown. It doesn't matter if you're in the settings in Google's apps or in a third-party app or multitasking or whatever. It just flies all the time.
Well, we're looking at the video stabilization. This is one of those features.
Yeah, we can, of course, talk about the cameras, too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because this is really, really impressive what we're seeing here. Google's done something different with the software in the Pixels to where it's kind of taking the information from the gyroscope inside and feeding that into the video that you're recording. So I imagine you've got to be losing a little bit of resolution in this process, right? And then it's basically using that gyroscope to digitally stabilize.
As far as the video goes, it's very interesting because the output can still be, by default, it's 1080p, but the big thing is it can do this image stabilization even on 4K video. So the sensor is definitely big enough that it's clearly capturing more than that, because when you look at it, it's a bit of a mind trick, because when you record and then you look at it later, everything looks kind of zoomed in a little bit because it is doing that situation where it crops in on the side to stabilize the middle. Mm-hmm. But once you get beyond that, that's not a problem. What the big thing is that in the end, it still outputs 4K video even with that stabilization. And the stabilization is kind of almost too good. It's super
It looks
smooth.
like you're strafing in a first-person shooter.
Yeah, it really does.
Exactly.
That's a really
like
great
I'm
way to
waiting for
put
you
it.
to bring out like
Yes.
the gun you want to pick, and
Right. So that's it.
That's with Magic
It is
Leap.
kind of right.
Yes.
It's unnatural. That's the biggest thing about it. So
Yeah.
like that video that you showed, if you're just walking around, you know, I shot that video holding the camera just like this, and you know, my hand's shaking around and I'm walking, and you don't see in the viewfinder how smooth it is. You don't see it until the output is finished when you're done recording. But when you're walking around, you expect movement, you know, side to side and around a little bit. But when you watch the video, it's like it's on a gimbal or some kind of, you know, Steadicam rig, and nobody's really expecting that. So if you're just walking around, it's almost too good. Now, if you're like, I took some videos really quick and I was flying down here today when I was on the train to the airport, when you're sitting still and it's just bumping around a little bit, that's perfect because you're expecting there to be no movement because you're supposed to be trying to stabilize it. You know, there's no natural movement with you walking around, and those videos look awesome. I mean, it's crazy how well stabilized they are because, you know, you're not just getting that little bit of smoothness from the optical image stabilization like you do on other cameras. It's all in software, so they can tune it up and down as much as they want, which is used to great effect.
And that processing, that's happened after you're done recording the video, right? So you stop recording the video and then it kind of churns on it for a little bit and then gives you the stabilized, or is that happening in real time?
It's happening in real time when it's saving it. It just doesn't have the processing power to be able to show you in the viewfinder how stable it is.
Got it.
So there is that little bit of disconnect because you don't know how smooth it is. So you're trying really hard to stabilize it. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing where they need to improve it a little bit is that it's trying to stabilize it so much that when you do, a movement where you look up and down or you go left and right, it doesn't really know that you're trying to move. So it doesn't know the difference between, movement that you're trying to show and you're not trying to show. So it just tries to stabilize everything. And that's a little funky, but more interesting than that for most people, because we don't all shoot a lot of video, is the stills. And of course that doesn't have stabilization, built into it per se, but the speed and the way it processes photos and everything like that takes into account all of this information as well, because it, again, of course, it knows where it's positioned and if it's moving and all that, and can time everything properly to take that perfect shot. And especially when you're doing HDR, you don't want movement in the phone at the same time. So they've somehow nailed that as well. Obviously, we don't know the details of how all this works, but somehow they're able to get, you're showing a couple of low light photos there. You would never expect a camera that doesn't have image stabilization to be able to take a smooth HDR photo like that.
Yeah, or the fact that this camera is f2.0, you'd kind of expect more to find like f1.8 in this day and age, and with smartphone cameras as the kind of the entry point for these low light photos. But this somehow is pulling off, I think, pretty impressive.
Of course, the images that we show, on the web that are compressed to go on a website don't always look as great. Right. What I need to do is pull together a Google Photos folder and put that out for people to download the originals, because of course they're big photos, because pretty much every photo is taken in HDR plus mode when you leave it on automatic. Mm-hmm. It very rarely takes just one exposure. So I think they're doing up to 5 or 7 exposures in some cases, and then melding them all together, of course, in HDR. But the big thing is that you don't know the difference, whether you're taking one photo or you're taking 3, 4, 5 photos. It can do it all, as soon as you push that button, just like we've expected with recent Samsung phones and, the Moto Z, and, they're all just as quick. But this is doing so much on the back end that it's extra surprising. We all use the Nexus 6P and 5X and knew how slow that was to take the photo and then process the photo. This takes better photos and it does it instantly. that's the most impressive thing. It's not something you think about every single time because you just want it to be fast, but it's really impressive in terms of the performance when you actually want to dive into the specifics.